Okay, hey everyone, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a really cool update for you guys from the brand Christopher Ward. A little about them. They are out of London in the UK, and they're an independent brand that grew up from a niche micro brand. In terms of the type of watch, this is a dive watch. Some key common characteristics and design what you're looking for a diver. Of course, you want to find water resistance. Take blue thumb type of screw down crown, something that's tough, legible with a dive time bezel, and a dive extension is always nice if on bracelet. This is their C60 Trident Lumière in blue, and it is essentially a new ultra premium titanium trident, now lighter, thinner, and more dynamically styled. These go for $23.90 on the batter bracelet as seen. Big huge thank you to Christopher Ward for sending in this little loaner unit for me to review and share my thoughts with you all. I've definitely been excited with this one when I first saw it. Was very curious to see how the blue kind of plays out in more natural lighting situations, and I have to say I've been very impressed. Honestly, I think just aesthetics wise, the dial alone was kind of enough to really sell this watch, but there are actually quite a few little nice details when it comes to the case, the bracelet. They even updated the clasp very quietly and really didn't mention any of that. So there's definitely a lot to unpack here, but with that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, let's go ahead and get this piece in hand. So obviously the main selling point is going to be this super dynamic dial with the 3D Lume block indices. I mean, it is very impressive, feels very modern and contemporary, and it's all played off really well, of course, with these matte surfaces in terms of the finishes on the bezel insert. On that granular dial there, you do get that nice grainy texture, as well as a bit of a fume kind of gradation where it's brighter in the center and then darker on the outer aspects. You also do have a slightly darker tint thanks to this grade 2 titanium. So this all kind of comes together. There's a lot of like little things, but at the same time, the real dynamic thing is going to be that dial, and going to be, I think, the main selling point of this wristwatch. Now at $23.90, that is not cheap, but this is going to feel very, very premium, you know, using titanium, also having an SW300, which is much thinner, and a COSC certified chronometer grade movement there, of course, in terms of that movement. So it's not just, you know, all styling and no substance. There's definitely a lot here that adds a lot of value in terms of the proposition. And yeah, at the end of the day, Christopher Ward is a young brand, but they have been growing, and they've really had a slew of just fantastic releases as of late. So it's one of those things to where there can be a bit of a trade-off. Yes, typically when you're spending this much money, you're going to go with an older brand. But hey, the reason why older brands are going to be more favored a lot of times is just because of how more recognizable they are. So you can feel like essentially you're paying for a part of that lineage. And the kind of other side of the coin here is, you know, while Christopher Ward is, you know, hardly a household name, within the right circles, it's absolutely an interesting talking point because people are so really enamored with how they've been able to ascend from very humble beginnings into a really fast-paced brand that is agile and you know, moving with all of the new trends and even setting quite a few trends while they're up there kind of leading the pack. Now, in terms of dimensions, 41 millimeters in diameter, 11 millimeters thick, and that is including the crystal. And look at the thin profile there, guys. That is absolutely beautiful. Even with that nice integrated helium release valve, I mean, that looks good and quite thin. So impressively thin at that. Now, The lug to lug is 47.9 millimeters, so just a touch under 48 millimeters. Grade 2 titanium, which is going to be more of a pure titanium, which, grade 5 is going to be an alloy that's going to have other materials in it that are going to help in terms of a couple of features like, making it stronger and whatnot. But here, without that, it's going to be more of a true titanium, a pure titanium, which is going to be tinted a little bit darker, and it'd be in terms of getting polishing done, it's going to be a little bit harder to have it kind of take that luster on, but I think they did a great job with these high polished bevels here and really making sure that there's a nice clean separation between the satin brushed and high polished surfaces. Sorry, just giving it a quick little wipe here to give you guys a nice unobstructed view of that clean bevel. I love the organic shapes here. Everything is very nicely proportioned. You look at the thin side profile, you look at the nice contoured 3-link setup here. Although each link is not fully articulated, it's still nicely contoured to make sure that you're going to get quite a comfortable fit. Now, getting into a couple of more details here, guys, let's get into, we mentioned the crystal yet? No, it has a flat sapphire crystal that does have an inner AR coating, so that's going to help you be able to, of course, look at this beautiful dial and really, really appreciate it for what it is. Now, when it comes to the bezel here, guys, woo! Oh, that's a nice bezel. That is beautifully, just such a great balance between the tactile clickiness and the smooth operation with just enough feedback to where you're not going to be worried about this, accidentally turning anyway. You're going to have to really, it's a nice deliberate turn. And again, beautifully balanced between clickiness and smoothness. Because honestly, sometimes those overly clicky bezels can be a bit jarring, and honestly, they can send vibrations into your fingertips that you're not going to like, and ultimately it's going to make you not have fun fiddling or fidgeting with this bezel, which in this case, this is definitely, this invites you to. It's so audible. The clicks are very distinct, very precise. Again, just very, very impressive. Okay, now that that's out of the way, we do also have a nicely signed screw-down crown with matching grip pattern there, as you guys can see, and that works beautifully. And then you also do have now some essentially kind of like a multi-piece setup there for the crown guard, where it appears to be kind of bolted in, kind of in the style of like maybe Oris there. And I think that looks really nice. It adds a nice clean contemporary look to it. And then of course there's some beautiful micro beveling there, which is definitely very impressive. Speaking of micro beveling, you can see there that that micro bevel goes all the way down on that case and then into the edges of this bracelet. So very, very nice. And then going into this updated clasp. Now, before we dive into that portion, let's look at this movement here. Okay, let me just get that to focus. There we go. So yeah, there you have it. There's a Sellita SW300-1, and this is, COSC certified chronometer. And also, thanks to it being a Sellita, you're getting that extended 56-hour power reserve. Still beats at 4 hertz, or 28,800 vibrations per hour in terms of the beat rate, which is very, very nice. And then, of course, if it's COSC, then, since it's a chronometer, it will be running in between -4 to +6 seconds per day. So that is very, very nice. So nice, tight timing tolerance in terms of it being essentially, you know, a 10-minute variance or 10-second a day variance. And, you know, it doesn't go too far onto the negative. I mean, I would have preferred, but, you know, again, this is outside of the tolerances of, you know, COSC and what they look for. But, you know, I'd be 0 to plus 10 seconds per day would be more ideal. But, hey, this isn't Meta certified or anything like that. And honestly, just because it's rated that way doesn't mean that it can't perform that way. Let's get this dust off of there. Now, getting into some more of just kind of the overall pieces here. The display back is nice, and it's a display back, which is cool, and it's nicely etched. There you can see there's a little bit of information here and there. It's integrated well. I do like the design, the cutouts that they have there for the grips for when you are removing it. I think this looks great. Getting into the dial, guys, I mean, come on. This matte gradient dial with applied Globolight XP indices. You're getting painted hands, so the bases are painted. Everything flows really nice. You're getting Super Luminova grade X1 BLC1. So that means it's going to be potent, and during daytime, it's going to appear quite white. And then in the evening time, when it gets a little darker, you're going to see some real fun happen. We'll get there, but you know what, let's do this. We'll get to the eventual you know, Lume shot, but let's just give you a little sneak preview, guys. That is wild. Yes. Okay, so yes, BL is going to be for blue in terms of the tone of that Lume, and that is fantastic. And that wasn't me really making anything very dark. That was absolutely just putting it close, taking my hands, and you know, it just comes to life. So very, very cool. 30 atmospheres or 300 meters of water resistance, which is fantastic for a dive watch, especially one at this size. It's still quite impressive, even with the use of the display case back. The bracelet is their, you know, pretty classic 3-link style here. You know, you do have a male end link. You do have quick release spring bars on there, so that is nice. And even the spring bars themselves, I would say, are, you know, a little bit nicer in terms of the, let me try to get this to where it can, you know what, maybe I could just do this. I'll just pop them out here. Ooh, of course, doing this on camera is going to be a little bit tricky. There we go. So that we wouldn't have to cut underneath. Check that out. So the nice thing is they even did the little triggers on here. You know, like they spent extra time, right? Like, look at the execution on that. I just think that's beautifully done. And as a matter of fact, now with that off, let me give the case back a quick wipe, and I'll get you guys just a slightly nicer sneak peek at the old movement housing there. Check it out. Very clean, very nicely done. And yeah, nice and thin as well. Now, getting into the rest of this bracelet, screw pin construction, which is beautifully overbuilt. Guys, look at the screw pins on here. Flush fit. Nice big cross sections there for the flat head. And then on the other side, again, look at how oversized that is. And beautifully flush. So very cool. Now the question is can I get this back on here easier than I took it off? This will be the true test. If I can reach around a tripod and do this, then you'll probably be okay to do this out in the real world with very little effort. So look at that, right back. So getting into the rest of the bracelet here, nice taper. It comes down to 16.4 millimeters. Of course, it is fully beveled on those outer links. And then this is actually a new 18.5 millimeter signed milled push button clasp that actually has 3 positions of toolless micro adjustment, which is less than the previous model, but they changed the styling here. So there's not going to be any ratcheting. You do have to push to engage. And then essentially you have it come out. You can't ratchet it in. You have to press to engage, and you're basically going to have that for the last one, the center position, and then pushed all the way in. And that's really all you need. And that is not Unfortunately, you know, really not going to be a diver's extension at this point. But the nice thing is with that quick release, you can really just switch out the bracelet for a strap or something if you really want to go diving. But this is definitely going to be perfect for things like micro adjustment. So if your wrist swells or anything like that, it's nice to know that you have a couple of these settings. Very reminiscent of something like the Notice Node X clasp there in terms of its design, you know, with the way that they did the button and even the kind of more simple extension style here. The nice thing is that it does cut short and it doesn't extend there past that, so that you can't, you know, you don't have any of the kind of unsightly extension, you know, in view there. So again, this type of stuff is very nice from that perspective. And yeah, it does help with the fit. Speaking of the fit, let's actually get it on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, this wears really beautifully. Of course, full-sized, nice and bold, extremely legible, right? And of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the camera lens, you're going to end up getting a fair amount. It's just, well, there we go. You're going to get a fair amount of lens, or I shouldn't say lens, but perspective distortion due to the way that the lens works, right? So it's going to make the watch seem a lot larger than it actually is. So what I like to do is keep my wrist nice and low and then just tighten up the frame here so that you guys can get, you know, still a detailed look, but just add a bit of a truer aspect ratio as to how this may lay on your own wrist. And I gotta say, it looks good. Look at that. Beautifully centered. You can see a little bit more of the overhang from the bracelet now. And of course, it is a larger dynamic dial, so it's going to give you a lot of visual punch and presence. And I think that's what you're going to want from here, right? So the 41mm diameter might be a hair large for some folks, but I think this is actually quite universal in the way that it wears. And if they shrunk it down, it wouldn't necessarily feel, I think, as clean. And you would kind of run the risk of it feeling a bit overcrowded due to the dimensions. And I mean, this is meant to be big and bold. I mean, look at those indices, guys. Ooh, look at the profile as that sits on the wrist, the way that it lays and just hugs the wrist. It just sits nice and low, beautifully thin there, guys. And yeah, this is absolutely a winner. And you can see there that titanium, although it does have a darker hue to it than your typical stainless steel, it's a good look, especially when it's finished to this level, in terms of just the crisp nature of the brushing here, and of course the polishing as well. So very nice. Let me just go ahead and we'll go ahead and zoom the camera back out, get this piece off the wrist, set up for some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Oh my, wow. Look at that. And it's like you would expect. Those indices, those 3D Lume blocks are, yeah, quite literally chock full of Lume. And it looks good. But one thing I always like to work in is going to be a bit of a low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes rather like in less than optimal lighting. And you guys can see there that matted surface is just really nice and quite consistent in terms of the way that the blue hues are going to render. And I do like that they did go with that gradation. Do I like to imagine what it would look like if it had a matching dial to the bezel, a more direct match? Sure, I think that could also work. But this gradation here that they have does give you a nice chance to add just a touch of extra contrast here, right? So you have these big, bright Lume blocks, and you have the darker surrounds, right? But thanks to the the dial itself and those outer, darker regions of the dial, it gives you a little bit more crisp outlook. But then, hey, if the whole dial was dark, then you kind of wouldn't have to worry about doing that. But I do think that, again, it does add a certain level of depth. And this dial, with its 3D nature, really is screaming depth from the top of its lungs. So having this kind of have that 3D effect, thanks to that kind of semi-fume gradation there, I think, again, it just fits and it ties in. Would I be thrilled to see one that didn't have the gradation? Sure. Do I know if it would look better or not? I don't know necessarily. I think this looks good, so I'm not going to argue with it. And also, it kind of does tie into the fact that for the 12, their titanium models, their more premium ones, also do have a gradation to them. So, it's a bit of that kind of family design language. And man, this thing looks awesome. Really, really digging it. But let's go ahead, get the lights back on here and get into some closing thoughts. All right, guys, on the wrist, great proportions that really achieve that perfect balance of ratios between the dial, bezel, and lugs and bracelets, right? So it's just kind of all comes together to just feel quite organic in terms of the flow of the watch. Now, in terms of model variants, it's also available in a black gradient dial and bezel, as well as an orange dial and black bezel, or the blue gradient as seen. In terms of comparable models, a lot more deliberately premium package that, I think even at $2,000, this can still compete with watches costing double, right? Like typically you buy a watch for $800, you say, oh yeah, this can compete with stuff double that, guys. This watch is around $2,000 and it can still compete with watches that are double its value. So, I mean, right there should probably tell you enough in terms of if you're curious on if the value proposition is strong enough for this piece. Bottom line here, guys, the Lumière is currently the ultimate C60 Trident, and it elevates both the Trident Diver and Christopher Ward in terms of their brands, right? The sub-brand of the Trident Diver and the brand as a whole of Christopher Ward to a whole new level. While the basic C60 Trident is still available at around half the price, offering similar value proposition at a more attainable price point, the Lumière offers you a legitimate halo diver experience, right? Like top tier. This isn't the entry level. This isn't the everyman's Christopher Ward. This is the thinking man's Christopher Ward. So this one's really cool. It pulls out all the stops. It doesn't leave you really wanting for more. It's not like there's another one that, oh, well, this has this feature and like this is the one that has all of the features. It's like, do you need features? And they just said yes, all of them. So yeah, it just showcases how great the C60 Trident platform can really be if you're willing to pay that Halo model premium. So of course it's not cheap. It's not for everyone, even for Christopher Ward fans. I really believe that. There's plenty of Christopher Ward fans that they like Christopher Ward specifically because of how affordable it is. So they see something like this and they're upset by it. I will say though, there are plenty of people who might have been turned off by Christopher Ward in the past due to it being smaller and the things that are intrinsic to the brand. But now that they've really expanded and they're doing these watches that are exponentially, more highbrow and more detailed and more capable and, more, just refined in overall design and execution, that's going to draw some people in. And some of those people are going to say, hey, well, I was thinking about buying a Pelagos and I can get this now for cheaper. I was thinking about getting a Yachty, but it's just like, do I need a Yachtmaster I like that it's matted and I like that it's titanium, but I wouldn't wear it a whole lot. So, I want that experience though. And it's like, okay, here's something you can have with a very similarly curated, quality set, versus something like that. And it's still ultimately, comparable to something like a Yachtmaster, while at the same time being priced below a Pelagos. So I think that's pretty impressive, and I think it's pretty smart from the brand to just offer something like this. Again, this watch is not for everyone. It's not even for every Christopher Ward fan, but I think this is going to attract a lot of people to the brand. And even if you aren't necessarily shopping within this price bracket, whether you be above or below, this definitely gives you vibes to where it could be that watch that makes you change your ways, right? Maybe it makes you buy a watch that's a little bit on the cheaper side if you're coming down from, more traditional luxury, or if you're more onto the micro brand side, this could be definitely the type of watch that gets you to kind of pony up a little extra because of all of the great feature sets and qualities that we've just discussed over the last, good couple of minutes here. So with that said, let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please do a like, and if you're already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.